everybody, it's Kevin DeWalt of Prolego. So while I enjoy my second cup of coffee of the day, I thought I would talk a little bit about a really interesting revelation that happened yesterday. Bloggers released an allegedly internal memo from a Google employee talking about the company's AI strategy, and it has some really interesting insights that reveal just how complicated this war is. So in a nutshell, though, what the employee advocates is that Google should stop trying to develop its own proprietary custom large language models to compete with OpenAI. And instead, it should throw its full weight and engineering resources behind the open source community like it successfully did in Android and Chrome. And the article then goes on to argue why the open source community is ultimately going to win and why OpenAI and Google are effectively doomed and have already lost the race before it begun. Okay, so so I do agree with the author, and I think this has good implications for your AI strategy. But let me first describe why some of these points are debatable. Well, the first point is that the author seems to suggest that ultimately open source always wins. And this isn't true. And there's lots of instances where open source doesn't win. The best example I know of is 25 years ago, I installed the Linux operating system on my desktop computer for the first time. And there was lots of discussion about how Linux on desktop was going to overtake Windows and be the dominating operating system. Of course, well, that didn't happen. 25 years later, we're all using Mac OS or Windows. So open source doesn't always work. Additionally, as lots of people have noticed, GPT-4 is far ahead of any other open source alternative or any proprietary model out there. So if you're going to be building something right now, it doesn't even make sense to start with something else because the capabilities are so much farther ahead than anything else that's available. So I guess those are the arguments against the author's point, but he goes on to make, he or she I should say, goes on to make a number of other points that are worth considering. Effectively, when you release this type of innovation technology into the hands of tens or hundreds of thousands of creative people, they're going to iterate very quickly and come up with new approaches that you just can't come up with when you're inside of a company. One of the innovations that people realized was that you can take a substantially smaller large language model and train it on more specific and better quality data and get the same level of performance on some tasks as a very, very, very large language model trained on poorer data. Now, this revelation has some amazing economic consequences because a very, very large language model may take tens of millions of dollars to train, but a really, really small language model may only take $100 to train. So the economic disparity here is amazing if these kind of techniques continue to work. The author also goes on to suggest that one of the ways that the open source community will win is by being able to stack improvements on top of each other. So the author advocates that as people take these language models and come up with better training data and retrain them, that other individuals can take and make incremental improvements. So the author argues that this is a faster way to innovate than is available with a large company like OpenAI or Google trying to train their own proprietary models from scratch. And in fact, we know that this is possible because this is exactly what happened last year with the image generation models. I mean, DALL-E 2, that when OpenAI released it, shocked the world, but a couple months later, Stability AI was released, and the ecosystem and tooling around it has made it, on par with or ahead of OpenAI's proprietary solution. And when you consider the cost that it's effectively free for many companies to use, it becomes a no-brainer. So there's a couple other reasons why the open source community will have some advantages, and that is like individuals and the whole community are free from a lot of the institutional constraints like a Google or an OpenAI has. So Google has to answer questions to CNN and reporters and the public and potentially lawmakers about how they're building this technology and how they're putting in safeguards and how it's going to be used. Well, the proverbial guy living in his mom's basement eating Pringles all day long doesn't get called by CNN reporters, and the public doesn't ask them about the alignment problem. This person just does whatever they want. They're trying to solve a problem, and even if they have the best of intentions, they're going to try to solve the problem and release it into the open without having to, having to have meetings with the ethics committee about whether releasing something correctly. So without those institutional constraints, the open source community can just execute far faster than any one individual company can keep up. But finally, there's another real reason. Like might be possible that the capital available to create these large language models is so big, and that the companies that can spend $100 million retraining a model, like allegedly OpenAI did, will have a distinct advantage. But even if that's true, the open source community may still win. And that's because there are companies who have an economic incentive to underwrite this cost. And the companies who leverage these large language models to make money in a different fashion are going to be willing to back the open source community. And we know this is already happening. In fact, Meta, Facebook, has essentially said that's their strategy in their earnings call. And that's why they put money behind PyTorch and other open source communities. Because they make money selling ads. They don't make money selling models. And so if they can leverage the brain power of 100,000 engineers to make their products better, they can use them to sell more advertising inside their ecosystem. And the same applies to probably Apple, Netflix, Spotify. There are thousands of companies out there with an economic incentive to make sure that the open source community wins. And so for these reasons, I think it's pretty inevitable that the open source solutions are going to quickly achieve parity with or surpass what any proprietary company can come up with. But regardless, it doesn't matter. One way or another, you're going to have many different options besides GPT-4 available to use. And I realize that what I'm saying runs counter to a lot of the narrative in the media, and also just a lot of I see the strategies advocated by the services companies. At Prolego, we have been advising our clients for months since this wave of technology emerged to start designing their systems such that they're not locked into any particular large language model, even GPT-4, although it's the best available. And it's simply because you're going to have other options. Unfortunately, there are companies that are making architectural and design decisions with their initial proof of concepts and their initial solutions that don't consider the implications of swapping out other models. For example, investing a ton of time into complex prompt engineering strategies might be wasted if you switch to a model where those specific prompts that you've customized and tuned no longer work. There's no guarantee they're going to be transferable or even backwards compatible from new releases of a better model from OpenAI. Additionally, if you're looking at creating embedding vectors, like if you're looking to have a chat interface or a Q&A with your documents or a semantic search solution, you need to be able to have an architectural design that you're able to regenerate those embeddings with a different language model, because you can't take the embeddings from one model. You can't take the embedding vectors from one model and use it on a different model. At least as far as I know, that's not possible. Anyway, this arms race is going to continue. None of us know how it's going to play out, but whatever it is, it's pretty inevitable that there's going to be lots of different large language models out there, and you need to start thinking of them as not these amazing magical solutions available only from OpenAI or Microsoft, but think of them as individual software functions and software modules, and you're going to have thousands of these running in your environment for all the different types of situations. Anyway, hope it helps. Have a great day.